is this how 2026 is going to go when it comes to reading books? Because if so, I ain't picking up another book. Hello, beautiful people. If you have been here since the beginning, then you might see something familiar. Maybe, oh, I don't know, the fact that we have come full circle. And I am once again recording in front of this video because I have figured out this is just the best lighting for me. Okay. And I finally have my bookshelf, so I decided to move it back there. Okay. I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you've been around long enough to know that I started here, moved to the other room, came back, sat on my reading bed, and now have moved back here, you let me know what you think. But personally, I think this is the best. So, without further ado, if you are new here, welcome. My name is Frank, and I do talk about all things bookish. So I'm going to do my best to keep this video as short as possible because we do have a reading wrap up today. I've decided that maybe it would be a fun idea to just go over all of the books that I have read up until this point, and that's exactly what this was supposed to be. And then I realized that I have read 32 books from January to the end of March, and I'm not doing that. So we're going to do January and February today, and then maybe at the end of April I will do another wrap up of all of the books that I read in March and April. I don't know, because I don't have the stamina for 32 books. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I really can't do it. So I'm going to do my best to keep everything spoiler free because this is a wrap up. I don't want to ruin anything for you if you are planning on reading any of these books. But of course, I am going to be talking about some of the contents inside of the books. If that does not sound like something particularly interesting to you, or you are the type of person that likes to go into reading books completely blind without knowing anything about them, then I'm not sure this is the video for you. Otherwise, let's get into it. Now, another thing worth mentioning, I'm not using a star rating system for two reasons. One is that I rarely rate books with star ratings anyway, so I don't even have that data. And the second reason is that because I'm a mood reader, the longer I sit on a book, my feelings might differ, so the ratings would fluctuate, and that's not very helpful, is it? So instead, I'm going to be doing a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or maybe just like a maybe in regard to how much I enjoyed the book and how highly I think you should bump up the book on your TBR. So hopefully that's sort of helpful. So January, I opened up the year with Counterweight by Juna. This is a science fiction novel that was originally written in Korean and translated into English, which is obviously the version that I read. This novel was one of those things where unfortunately I was literally forgetting the plot as I was reading it. That's not to say this was a bad book or anything like that. It's just to say that for me personally, I wasn't as involved in it as I could have been. I don't know. It was the beginning of the year. The holidays had just happened. It was a weird time, all right? So, this science fiction novel takes place in a futuristic dystopian society on the fictional island of Patusan. And it's kind of like in a world where a bunch of corporations have just become giant conglomerates that own absolutely everything. There's a Korean conglomerate known as LK, in which our main character, Mac, works for this conglomerate as like kind of like a spy, basically. And there's a series of events that happen in this book in which Mac has to figure out this mystery. There are brain microchips, there is a lot of action. And if I do remember correctly, the author actually wrote this as a screenplay to be a low budget science fiction film. So that's exactly how this read to me. I feel like if I had actually seen this as a movie, I might have enjoyed it a lot more, but as a book, I'm not sure that it translated very well. This is very plot driven, very plot oriented, and half the time I couldn't even remember our main character's name. The ending of the book was really confusing. There was a lot of information that was just thrown out right at the end that I was like, wait, hold on, what? This is changing. It was supposed to be commentary about the motivations of some of the actions and situations that occurred earlier on in the book, but personally, it felt like a complete 180 as to the tone of the book. It just entirely shifted right at the end, and I was like, I'm not sure that I quite understand what the purpose of all of this was. So I'm gonna put this as like a maybe, right? I'm gonna put this as like a you might enjoy it if you like plot driven, action oriented science fiction novels, then you could probably really enjoy this one. Moving on, the second book I read in the year was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. So this is a short collection of essays. I say short collection, it's actually just a letter that James Baldwin's uncle wrote to him when he was a child, and then another essay in which James Baldwin is kind of examining his early life growing up in Harlem and the role of religion in the Black American community. It is also a personal examination of racial injustice in America. I say a personal examination because a lot of this felt like a memoir. It's more akin to a memoir than anything else. And I really appreciated this perspective. Although I haven't read any of James Baldwin's fictional works, I do think that he had a very distinct voice that came out in this essay. And if you are looking for a more memoir like nonfiction book, especially something that is very quick and easy to read, then I do recommend this one. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up because this is exactly what it presents itself as. Like I said, a very quick, short examination of James Baldwin's early life and some instances and occurrences that happened in his life that he would like to share with us. So if you're into nonfiction, you like memoirs, I think you're really going to like that. Next, we have Trixie and Katya's Guide to Modern Womanhood. This is also another nonfiction memoir-like book by Trixie Mattel and Katya, who are two drag queens. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you must know who these women are. You know who they are. I don't watch their podcast. I don't particularly do podcasts like that, so forgive me. But I have seen some snippets here and there online, obviously, just little clips taken from the podcast. And I do know that these women are absolutely hilarious. They're so funny. And that really, really came through in this memoir. This is a combination of being funny and witty while simultaneously sharing their philosophical nuggets about their life and things that they've learned and just trying to share that with other people in a very humorous way. And I think that really came across. There were a handful of times where I was actually laughing out loud. I also did listen to this one as an audiobook, so a lot of it did just feel like their podcast because there are a few sections throughout the book that are the two of them co-writing in an interview style, so it felt like their podcast. It was really funny. It was very enjoyable. They are absolutely hilarious. And like I said, I don't know too much about them as people. I don't know too much about their podcast. So this was me kind of going in only having ever seen their season of Drag Race. And that was a long, long, long time ago. Not me dating myself. Anyway, it was funny. And this is where things started to go a little bit sour for me. January was not a great reading month. It was and it wasn't. It was just so strange to go from books that I was enjoying to reading these fiction books that I was so excited about, and they flopped so hard for me. So of course, I am talking about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I already have a video about this in which I extensively discuss how disappointed I was in this book. The way that people talk about V.E. Schwab's writing, I was expecting some kind of masterful expression of of whatever these characters were going to experience. I was so excited to read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil that before I even cracked it open, I bought a copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is also another book that everybody gushes over. And because I was so disappointed with Bury Our Bones, I legitimately have been hesitating reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. That's how pissed off I was at the end of this book. So if you don't know what it's about, this is essentially, the marketing was toxic lesbian vampires. So naturally, I'm like, sign me the fuck up, dude. Anything. We're talking lesbians, we're talking vampires. I'm there, I'm sat, I'm here, okay? No, this wasn't for me. So this is told from three distinct character POVs. We have Maria, who throughout the book, she eventually becomes known as Sabine. Then we have Alice, and we have Charlotte / Lottie, right? And if you want to think of it, it's more like there's two halves of the book. We start off with Maria / Sabine's half of the book, and then we end it sort of with Charlotte, Lottie's half towards the end, and then the actual end of the book is Alice. And Alice's point of view is actually just sprinkled throughout these short chapters throughout the entirety of the book. I didn't necessarily mind the layout of this. I was wondering where it was going to go, what the purpose of it was, especially because throughout the entire book, I did not care about Alice at all. I did not particularly find her character very intriguing. I wasn't interested in her backstory. She was my least favorite character. And that is why the ending just really pissed me off so bad, because I'm not going to spoil it. If you want to read it, you should read it. But for me personally, I had little issues throughout the book that were just exacerbated because I hated the ending so much. And the ending truly crushed this book for me. It was very disappointing. And that's really all I want to say about that. Toxic lesbian vampires, absolutely. Absolutely, that is what this book was about. And at least I got to hand it to the marketing. They were not lying about that at all. So moving on to my next disappointing read, and this was Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. Everyone gushes over this book, and I have to admit, I can see the appeal for a certain audience, especially because this is a YA horror book. Okay. So naturally I can understand why there are some people, especially younger adults or actual young adults, or even, teenagers or whatever it is, that probably read this and really, really enjoyed it, because this is very reminiscent of Tumblr era writing. If you were there, you were there. If you weren't, that's okay. That means you are probably an emotionally stable adult. Okay. Tumblr was a weird time. I was there from 2000 and like 2010 to probably 2013. I met my long-term girlfriend, ex-girlfriend actually, on Tumblr. We literally lived across the country from each other. We did the whole long distance thing. We ended up getting together, moving in together. It was a good time. It was a terrible time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And that is what Tumblr was really about. And if you were there, you were there. And so this writing for this book, very reminiscent of that. And I don't mean that as a positive necessarily, but I don't think that it is inherently a negative. I think my association with it was just not great. And so there was a lot of flourished, flowery writing and imagery that just didn't make any sense. It was like trying to be beautiful for the sake of being beautiful, but didn't mean anything. And there's also some like trigger warning, trigger warning. There's like some mention of something being alluded to of an eating disorder. And that was really weird. It was not handled very gracefully, in my opinion. But some people didn't care or didn't mind it or actually enjoyed it, found representation in it, and that's great. Okay. It just wasn't for me. Now here's where we have a problem, because I crushed this book. I read this book in like a day and a half. I was eating it up because I was like, this is such an easy read, right? There weren't any themes or problems with it that I was like finding distracting or unable to move through. Now, what this book is about is a young man named Andrew who is attending this private school that he's been attending, right, with his twin sister named Dove, and they are entering in their senior year, and they are part of this friend trio. It's Dove, Andrew, and their friend Thomas. And now Andrew has been secretly in love with Thomas forever. Okay, forever. And he doesn't really know how to express that to him. Now, something happened at the end of their junior year where Dove and Thomas had a huge blowout fight, and neither of them have told Andrew about what it was about or like why it happened. But all we know is that Dove and Thomas are not speaking to each other. So it makes things kind of weird for Andrew. He's kind of like in the middle trying to navigate, being obviously friends with Thomas, who he's in love with, but also like being with Dove, who is his twin sister. Okay. So Andrew also writes these very macabre, dark, eerie horror story, fairy tale kind of things. And Thomas is an artist, and he gains a lot of inspiration from Andrew's writing. So Thomas will often draw a lot of the monsters and creatures inside of Andrew's stories. And they kind of just have this like symbiotic relationship in which artistically they inspire each other a lot. Very cute. I actually kind of liked that dynamic between the two. So at some point early on in the book, Andrew, who is roommates with Thomas, right? This is kind of like a boarding school situation. So they are roommates, and Andrew finds that Thomas is sneaking out every single night, and he's coming back in the wee hours of the morning, covered in mud, covered in twigs and leaves and crap. And Andrew's like, what the hell is that about? So finally, he follows Thomas out one night and discovers that Thomas has been fighting off these monsters that have come to life from Andrew's stories. And the entirety of the book is them just kind of like fighting these monsters together. And that's pretty much what I really want to say about the plot of this novel. If you haven't read it, then that's really all you need to know. I do want to say that the ending made me mad. I felt like I was being rage baited. I felt like this was one of those endings where I was like, no, 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 there's too, like, you're leaving way too much open to interpretation. And especially because the author had an acknowledgement right at the end of the book that was like, oh, if you're feeling frustrated staring at the wall with your jaw on the ground, then that means I did exactly what I wanted to, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember exactly what the author had said, but after reading that, like, I was already annoyed at the ending, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I read the acknowledgement, and I was like, oh, so you're just rage baiting me. Oh, okay. Well, you succeeded. I was rage baited successfully. Congratulations. I had to put a hold on Hazelthorn, which is another book by this author, as I was reading Don't Let the Force In, because I was like, oh man, I think I might actually like this author's writing. And then I get to the end, literally went right into Libby and canceled my hold. I was like, no, I'm not doing this again. Anyway, this is a maybe. This is a maybe. I think you might like this. Maybe. I don't know. It depends on if you like YA horror, if you like flowery prose, if you like poetic kind of writing, and if you like ambiguous endings, then you might enjoy this one. If not, I wouldn't bother. So now you're thinking to yourself, you're like, okay, Frank, you hated Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. You hated the ending of Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. Ideally, things have gotten better for you, right? You would be wrong. After Don't Let the Forest In, I read In the Shadow of Spindrift House by Mira Grant. And I have a video on this as well. I think I'm actually literally wearing this sweater in that video. So it should be easy for you to go find if you want to. I can also just put a card up here. Anyway, this book sucked my big fat nuts. I did not like this at all. If you do go to watch my video, it is me talking shit for approximately like 20 to 25 minutes about the myriad of flaws of this book. It made no sense. Okay, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so basically the premise of this book is there is a Scooby-Doo style group of kids that solve mysteries and all of this other stuff, but adulthood is fast approaching, right? They just graduated high school last year, and now they're approaching that age where they kind of have to start figuring out what the hell they're going to do with the rest of their lives, because obviously they can't just go around solving mysteries like the Scooby Gang, okay? So at a certain point, our main character, whose name I can't even remember because I just don't fucking care, is trying to convince everybody, like, let's just go on one last mystery, right? Like, I need, she was like adopted by her grandparents because her parents died horribly in front of her when she was a child, and her grandparents ended up dying as well or something. So she ends up getting adopted by one of her friends' moms. So so anyway, moral of the story is this group goes to solve one last mystery in which they have to figure out who the true owners of a certain house are, right? This house, this fantastical house that these three families are arguing over who actually owns it, but they don't have the original deed or anything like that. It's somewhere locked up inside the house. So the kids have to go find it and figure out who the actual owner is. Now, there is a lot of crap that happens, but also simultaneously, literally nothing happens. That's how terrible this book was. I didn't like it for many reasons, most of which have to do with the plot made no sense. The ending quite literally made sure that the entire plot of this book was entirely irrelevant, like it contradicted itself. The author introduced a bunch of crazy ass questions right at the end of the book with absolutely no explanation, and then just kind of wrote it off as like, oh, well, this is like an eldritch terror, and so you don't really actually know anything about what's going on. That's like the whole point of eldritch horror, is like it's supposed to be this indescribable, scary thing that you just don't even understand. But that's not at all how this felt. This wasn't giving eldritch horror. This was giving, you are introducing just a bunch of random fucking information right at the end and not providing any information, any context about it. That's how that felt. Characters, very flat, very unlikable. They had no substance whatsoever. Yes, they were supposed to be reminiscent of a character from the Scooby Gang, right? Like there's, they have the stoner character, they have the girl with the glasses, and the glasses are a very prominent part of the storytelling in this book, okay? So like, yes, they are supposed to kind of mirror the dynamic of the Scooby Gang, but outside of just very generalized, faint wisps of these Scooby characters, our actual characters in the book had nothing else, no substance, no nothing. Now, I don't know if this novel was meant to be satirical, and I think I do say that in my review of this book. If this was meant to be satire about terrible, terrible, terrible mystery solving thriller books, then Mira Grant did a phenomenal freaking job. But if this is not satirical, which I did not get the sense that it was, this book just enraged the living shit out of me. So now we have Bury Our Bones, Don't Let the Forest In, and The Shadow of Spindrift House back to back to back. You got to understand, dude, I actually felt like my world was ending. I felt like that's so dramatic. I'm sorry. But I legitimately was like, is this how 2026 is going to go when it comes to reading books? Because if so, I ain't picking up another fucking book. Luckily, right after In the Shadow of Spindrift House, I read She's a Lamb by Meredith Hambrock, and I friggin' loved this book. This is essentially, if I had to just like give a very condensed down version of the plot, it is an aspiring musical theater actress having a literal mental breakdown after that she's quite literally going insane to the point where she will do whatever is necessary to get a leading role in the Sound of Music musical. And that is the plot. There is a lot of overarching themes of misogyny, of men in this character's life, continuously failing her over and over and over and over again. And these are not subtle, by the way. You're not going to read this book and be like, I wonder what the author is trying to say. Like, it's very much in your face, but I didn't mind that at all. I really enjoyed the way that the story was told. I really enjoyed that our main character is simultaneously an unreliable narrator, and yet I never doubted her for a minute. I never hit a point where I was like, oh, I don't know if she's telling the truth, or I don't know if she's actually lying. Like, nope, I believed her every single time. I believed her every single time, because it's not just one man, it's not just two, it's not just three. It's literally every single man in this book fails this woman time and time again. Men that are supposed to be taking care of her, protecting her, instead are exploiting her vulnerability and her position and lack of power and agency in her life. And they decide to exploit that instead of actually help her. Even the men, even the nice guy, right? There's a nice guy character in here, and he does exactly the bullshit you think he's going to do. And it's just one of those things where it's like, despite the fact that Meredith Hambrock very purposefully, from the very beginning, too, wanted our main character to be an unreliable narrator and to kind of almost be unlikable a little bit. She was flawed. She had her issues. Okay, I'm not even gonna lie, but there were a couple times where she legitimately, like, okay, actually, I don't want to spoil it, but I really enjoyed this one. I thought that it was really fantastically done. You can kind of see where the ending is going. Like, there's never a point in time where you think shit is going to work out for this character at all. You pretty much know how it's all going to go down at the end, but that is almost entirely irrelevant to how you feel about the book, because this is a very character oriented, character driven story. And the journey is really what we're supposed to be paying attention to, and the way that trauma and abuse can quite literally alter our brains. And I thought that Meredith Hambrock did a phenomenal job with this book. This was, I'm not going to say it was a 5-star read for me. This is definitely a thumbs up, but I will say that it had a couple things that I wish had been explored a bit more, or certain characters, like certain things had gone differently for certain characters. I don't know. There were some things that I didn't particularly care for, but overall, this was a solid read for me. And if anything, I'm like, it's been a couple months since I've read it, but thinking back to it now, like, I'm even more fond of it than I was when I actually did read it. So, yep, this is a big old thumbs up for me. Now, the next book I read in January was 1984 by George Orwell. I actually don't even know that I want to go into what the premise of this book is about, because if you haven't heard of 1984 by George Orwell, I don't know what you're doing. And that's not to say that you have to have read it, but like, you have to have at least heard of this book. Anyway, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. Dystopian, futuristic society. Well, technically, it's not future. It was futuristic when he wrote it, but it takes place in the year 1984. So obviously, it's not the future for us, right? But it takes place in a what was then futuristic society, in which it is a very totalitarian government regime has taken over, and they rewrite history all of the time to keep people confused and complacent. And this deals a lot with themes of misinformation, of fascism, of the way that it can arise and the way that power is maintained. And this is actually, believe it or not, something that you might not expect. This is a character oriented story. This is actually more to do with our main character, Winston, and his movements throughout this society, and how he's like functioning, and his need and desire to almost push back against everything that he's being told. But it's very dangerous to do that in this society. You've probably heard of the thought police before. That is exactly where it comes from, this book, right? You've probably heard the term doublespeak or newspeak. That again comes from this book. You have probably, like, you've heard the term Big Brother, right? Oh, Big Brother's watching, blah, blah, blah. It comes from this book. So this book has quite literally altered a lot of the way that pop culture moved afterward. And to this day, we have terms that people use that literally come from this book. So this the ending sucked, and by the ending sucked, I mean I fucking hated it because it made me sad. It brought out a lot of, like, it like crushed me, okay? Not that it was poorly written, it's just that I didn't like it because I wanted things to be different. I wanted it to go differently, and it didn't. And that's okay, because it was still a great book. It was still one of those things where, if you are looking to read classics, if you're looking to get more into classics, then I'm definitely going to give you a thumbs up on this one. This is one of those classics that I do think everyone should read at some point in their life, just because it is really kind of important. I don't know. That's just how I felt about it. Next we're keeping it going with the classics, okay? As you can see, like through the order of these books and how I read them, I was definitely in a mood, right? Like I am a mood reader through and through. So next we have Candide by Voltaire. And this was literally fucking hilarious. Like I was not this is such a quick read too. I was not expecting this to be actually funny. There were really funny moments, and it was even funnier when you actually think about what this book is about. So essentially we're following along our main character Candide, and he is kind of being thrust into situation after situation in which he is kind of exploring not only the meaning of life, but what position unfettered optimism has in this world, like what purpose it serves and whether or not it does serve a purpose. You know, he starts off as this very optimistic young man because one of his teachers told him that basically having blind optimism in life is going to get you really far. And so Candide is literally just put into situation after situation. He's moving all across the globe, all over the place, and he is slowly but surely becoming more and more bitter as he sees the good and the evil of human nature. And this book also tackles a lot of interesting things, especially when you think about the time period that this was written in, back in like the 1700s or something like that. It kind of explores the ideas of racism, of misogyny, and things of that nature in a very like fucked up way. I'll tell you that. Like this actually, there's a lot of like violence in this book, and yet somehow it's almost done in a humorous way. It was such a unique and interesting experience to read this book. It was just not it was not at all what I was expecting. And I'm sad to say that I have actually not even picked up anything else by Voltaire since I've read this. And now that I'm like making this video, it's making me want to read something else by this guy because I really enjoyed this book. And I think it takes about 3 to 3.5 hours to read it. So really quick too. Like this is one of those books that you can actually just get through very quickly. So yeah, I don't know. This is going to be a big thumbs up from me. I did thoroughly enjoy Candide by Voltaire. This was a good one. I would like to say that we're almost done, but we're not even done with January. God damn. Okay, my back is aching, y'all. So the next book was Slewfoot by Brom, and I actually do have a video of this one if you want to go watch it. But basically, what it's about is this woman named Abatha. She gets married off to a guy named Edward, who is from this Puritan village in Connecticut in the 1600s. And very early on in the book, this is not a spoiler because it happens in like chapter 1, okay? Very early on in the book, she becomes widowed. And if you know anything about women existing in Puritan society in the 1600s, you know that ain't really good for her, right? So her husband, Edward, had a deal, kind of like a contract with his brother, who technically owns the farm that they have and that Edward has been working for the last couple of years. And so Abatha has to fulfill this contract, or else her brother-in-law can legally just reclaim ownership of the farm. And so she is doing everything that she can to work the land, but things are not going well. Working an entire farm by yourself is really hard work, and Abatha learns this. But luckily for her, there is something brewing on her land. There is some kind of, as far as we know, malevolent spirit that also lives on this land. And they strike up some kind of deal in which I'm making it sound really nefarious. It's actually not. This book is really an exploration of, again, misogyny, of paganism, of religion as a whole, and the position that it kind of plays in this puritanical society. One of my critiques was that I wish that it had kind of, because obviously during this time, indigenous culture, indigenous people were very much present, existed on these lands. Okay. So I wish that Brom had kind of explored the indigenous cultural aspect a bit more, and maybe kind of brought light a bit more to the actual racism that these people faced. Because the thing is that indigenous culture, indigenous religion, indigenous spirits actually are a part of this story. So the fact that it wasn't expanded on, I think, was a really weak point for this book. But otherwise, I enjoyed it. This is a horror novel, and there is plenty of that in this book. I'm going to say this is a maybe. Like, I enjoyed this book. I thought it was good. It did have some weak points, like I said, but I think depending on who you are and what your style of reading entails, I think you might actually enjoy this one, or maybe you might not. So that's why I'm giving this a maybe. Okay, so the last book I read in January was The Island of Last Things by Emma Slowly. And again, I have a video about this, and you want to go check it out, where I really do get into depth about it, into the nitty-gritty about it all. But this is a literary fiction novel that takes place after this huge mass extinction event on Earth in which climate change and this fungal blight have basically massacred in like the entire world other than humans. Basically all of the plants, all of the animals completely gone because of this fungus, and there is one remaining zoo that is open in Alcatraz, which is that island that used to be a prison right off the coast of San Francisco. And our main character, Camille, is one of the zookeepers at this zoo. And so this story really explores Camille and another zookeeper named Sailor who comes to work there, at the very beginning of the book. And it kind of explores their dynamic and their relationship and the things that Camille actually learns and gains as a person in order to move through this world differently than she has. She is very much the type of person that is not going to question the status quo, is not going to question the way that things go down until she meets Sailor and all of that kind of changes. And this is really a beautiful exploration of what it means to hope for a better world and what we can actively do as individuals to maybe try to bring that world that we want to see to light. And that is really the overarching theme of this book, is the role that hope plays and how important it is for us to continue to move through the world. Something I do want to say about this book, and I think I mentioned this in my actual video about it, was that there is a dynamic between Camille and Sailor that does feel very sapphic. Their dynamic feels very much like it would be romantic. And I'm not sure if Emma slowly decided that she did not want to pursue that line of thinking because she didn't want to distract from the main storyline and the main point of this book, or if it was because she just was nervous to add queer representation or this specific dynamic simply because she was worried about how it was going, like any backlash or something like that. I don't want to speak for this author. I don't know. All I know is that for me personally, one of my critiques was that I wish that dynamic had actually been explored. Their relationship throughout the book is technically very much platonic, but it does feel like there are heavy underlying sapphic undertones to their dynamic, and I really wish that it had been explored a bit more. So I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. If you like literary fiction, then I think you'll actually thoroughly enjoy this. If literary fiction ain't your bag, then skip this one, I suppose. Oh my god, I so totally hate that I have to hold this microphone. I have tried clipping it to my shirt, I've tried clipping it nearby, and if I don't hold it right up to my face, then it just echoes it, because this room is pretty empty, as you can see. But yeah, anyway, moral of the story is I feel like a turd holding this all the time, especially because I'm someone, as you can see with this hand, I talk a lot with my hands, very Greek of me, but I it's so annoying. Anyway, I just wanted to rant about that really quick. So starting February off, rough. It was rough. I'm, of course, talking about the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig. That would be One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I have a video on each of these, so I'm not really going to get into all of my critiques for this duology. If you don't know what it's about, then it is essentially this magical fantasy land known as Blunder, in which this infection has kind of taken over and people are scared to enter the mist that surrounds the kingdom of Blunder, because if they get infected, it's not necessarily a death sentence, but it's pretty close to one. And so you get these magical powers if you have this infection, but you also get slowly driven mad, or you outright, your body just fails and you die. So our main character, Elspeth Spindle, becomes infected at a very young age, but because of the nature of her magic and her infection, she's actually one of the few people that survives this infection. And it kind of explores her trying to end the mist, right? To get rid of the mist. Because there are also what are known as Providence cards, which think of like just a regular deck of playing cards. But each card has its own specific kind of magic. So in order to access it, you can just tap it 3 times and you can access whatever magic that specific card has. Anybody and everybody who has access to these cards can use it. You don't need to already be infected or anything like that. That's actually one of the perks of the cards, is that everybody can use it, except only the elites and those in the know and the king's royal court and everything like that actually have access to these Providence cards. So on paper, you would think that this duology would be really awesome. Unfortunately, the execution was just very lackluster. The characters were flat. Our main character, Elspeth, is basically non-existent. She has absolutely no motivations, no ambitions of her own. She's essentially just a pawn on a chessboard for all of the other characters to use as they see fit. She is just such a nothing character, and that really did piss me off because theoretically she's supposedly the main character of this series. The rest of the characters outside of like the nightmare were also not really fleshed out that well. Found them very annoying. There were so many plot holes. So many plot holes. There was a huge repetition issue, especially in the first book. It was like legitimately, it was awful. It was so bad. It did get better in the second book, and I was kind of grateful for that. And you're wondering, like, if I hated the first book so much, why did I even bother continuing? That's because I was buddy reading it with my sisters. And so we kind of decided to keep on pushing forward. It was only a duology, it was only 2 books. But all three of us really legitimately did not like the writing style. We did not much care for the characters. Like, all three of us read very different kinds of books. And both of my sisters are very much into fantasy and romantasy. So for them to not even really like this book, these books, I think that really speaks to how bad they were. This is absolutely a thumbs down for me. But I will say that if you are someone who tends to read a lot of fantasy and romantasy, you might actually enjoy this one. There's a lot of tropes, there's a lot of romance and things like that. Didn't work for me, but it might work for you. So I'll just say it like that. Yeah, overall, wasn't a fan of this one. Oh my god, you guys, my back is like fucking crying. Okay. Next book was Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. This is a nonfiction collection of essays by the poet Audre Lorde. These essays and interviews really tackle homophobia, misogyny, misogynoir specifically, and basically it kind of discusses intersectionality before intersectionality was even a term that was coined. So Audre Lorde was a poet who lived at the intersection of being a Black woman, of being a lesbian, of being in an interracial relationship with a white woman, of having children. You know, she was a mother. So she was really coming at this with a very unique and I think very important perspective. And like I said, she was talking about the intersection of being here before intersectionality was even a term. So the thing I really enjoyed about this is that even though she's tackling these big, very important issues and conversations, because she was a poet, she did this in a way that was very easily digestible for the reader and very, I don't want to say pretty to read, but in a way that really kind of articulated the sentiments that she was trying to get across very well. This did not read like an analytical textbook or anything like that. This was very much almost like a memoir style of examining these systemic institutions, right? And I did thoroughly enjoy this so much. If you were looking to read nonfiction and you were interested in examining racism, homophobia, and Black women's experience and position in the United States, this is a really great place to start. I'm also going to talk about another book in a little bit, in a few minutes, but this is a very fantastic place to start, and I really did enjoy reading this one. So next we have Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I have an hour-long review, deep dive analysis of this book. This was my first 5-star read of 2026. I loved everything about this book. This is basically a dystopian sci-fi novel that explores the faults of the current American carceral prison system. And it kind of does it in a way that while we're examining these characters, we realize that the world that they're living in isn't even hyperbolic of the one that we currently do. So basically what it is that in this dystopian near future, prisoners who are serving life sentences are able to sign up for what are known as the chain gang sport. And what it is it's like a gladiator style fight to the death. That's exactly what it is. If they survive 3 years on the circuit, then they can obtain their freedom. So instead of spending 25 plus years in these horrible, terrible prisons, then they can obtain freedom. Now, only one person up until this point has ever done it, and a lot of people suspect that they were actually a plant from the game masters in order to prove that technically this is an achievable goal. But because it's only ever been one person, and they went on to promote the existence of this sport, a lot of people just think that this person was a plant. So we follow a few different characters throughout this book. The main characters are Loretta Thurwar and Hamara Stacks. I'm sorry, my brain is starting to go bloop. So I'm gonna have to move through this pretty quickly. Anyway, so that is essentially what this book is about, is these gladiator style games, fight to the death from these prisoners, and it explores the flaws of the prison system. This book is very much about abolition and the systems that are held in place in order for the for-profit prison system to function. Institutions like racism, like homophobia, like poverty. So, yeah, I think this is such a fantastic read. A lot of people didn't like the short and fast paced burst in chapters because we do kind of bounce back and forth from character point of view to character point of view. And I understand why that was frustrating for people, but this is told from third person omniscient. Okay. Fucking awesome. Third omniscient is my favorite style of narration because basically you get to explore not just like, oh, he did this, she said that. And so you get to explore different characters, but you get to get inside of their mind and understand multiple character motivations, not just main characters. So I loved that this was done in Third Omniscient. And I think this was such a solid and strong choice for this particular kind of story. I love that actual statistics and cases were cited at the end in the footnotes of these chapters to actually highlight and bring attention to the ways in which this story is not very hyperbolic at all, because these are things that happen to real people in the real world, in the here and now, or in the past. And I think that was a very important thing to include in a story like this, because the whole point of this book is to critique the carceral system. So really enjoyed this one. Thought it was very well done. Absolutely loved this. This is going to be a thumbs up for me. If you decide to read any of the books from this video, please let it be Chain Gang All Stars. Okay, folks, we are getting there. We're almost done. So the next book I read was Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism by Bell Hooks. And this is kind of the other book I was talking about when I was discussing Sister Outsider. And this book, it kind of tackles a lot of the same themes as Sister Outsider, less on the homophobia, more about misogynoir specifically. But the thing about this was that it was actually more academic in the way that this information was presented. Bell Hooks is actually citing actual cases, actual anecdotes, actual laws and systems and movements that she is talking about and criticizing. And essentially, the whole point of this book is to recognize how, as a movement, feminism, since its inception, has very much not included Black women for various reasons. And that every time Black women have tried to participate as a whole in the feminist movement, they have been purposefully excluded. And I think there is a lot to learn about this. I think this book does a really phenomenal job kind of illustrating how Black women specifically live at an intersection in which the fight for racial equality has often excluded them as well, simultaneously, while the fight for gender liberation and feminism has also excluded them from the conversation. And I think that Bell Hooks really did a phenomenal job presenting her case. This book does open up to a very horrible, horrible, horrible anecdote about the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what this anecdote is. One, because I don't know. I think YouTube would literally flag it. And also because saying it out loud is fucking atrocious. It was hard. It was rough to hear. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to hear about a lot of horrible, awful crap that happened to people during slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, but even post that. But the next time that a Black person tells you that they deserve reparations, and your response is going to be something along the lines of like, oh, well, that happened hundreds of years ago, that was those were other white people, that's not us, and blah blah blah. Like, I need y'all to fundamentally understand something. If you have been raised in the American education system, that system has failed us on purpose, but it has failed to actually illustrate and highlight how absolutely fucking insidious slavery was for Black people. And I'm making this video post the UN having that resolution that the slave trade was one of the most egregious crimes against humanity, and it passed, which is awesome. But again, there was so much pushback on that sentiment that like, oh, well, slavery is bad, but slavery's been happening everywhere. I don't think you understand how evil that shit really was. And there, like I said, there is an anecdote at the very beginning of Ain't I a Woman that really just highlights the awful shit. For reference, it involves a 9-month-old infant, if you need to know. It's awful, disgusting. Anyway, Yeah, I really recommend this book. This is a thumbs up for me. Thumbs up as in very educational. If you're going to read these books, like Sister Outsider and Ain't I a Woman, reading them back to back, I think they really fill each other out. Ain't I a Woman supplements all of the laws and statistics and anecdotes that Sister Outsider kind of doesn't really focus on, and vice versa. Whereas Ain't I a Woman is focusing a lot on these statistics, on actual movements and historical moments that Bell Hooks is pointing to. I think Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider really kind of rounds that experience out by having Audre Lorde express the philosophical and more emotional and personal moments and feelings about the same kind of thing. So yeah, anyway, these two books, both thumbs up. And like I said, I think you should read them back to back. I think you will get a lot out of both of them. And I think that they really kind of complement each other very well. So that's that. All right, guys, we only got 4 left. Oh my God, we can do this. Okay. Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fito. So basically, this is a Victorian era horror novel in which this woman named Winifred Naughty, who was a governess, arrives at Ensor House to be a governess for the children that live in this house. And basically, she's a serial killer. That's not me spoiling anything really, because you find that out really early on. And like chapter 1 or chapter 2 or something like that, the author quite literally tells you, right? It's this governess arriving in this carriage to Ensor House, and she's like looking up at the family, waving at her in the window, and she's like, oh, what a shame, they're not going to live past 3 months, right? She like tells you straight up what's going to happen. So this isn't a spoiler, but yeah, this was again one of those books that I kind of forgot as I was done reading it. It was fine. Like I remember the story itself and I remember like things that happened, but it was just one of those things where none of it was that shocking to me. There was nothing that happened in it that was like super memorable. I will say that if you are into horror, you might like this one, but if you are someone who reads horror but you draw the line at extreme violence against children, don't read this. This book has a lot of that. Otherwise, yeah, this is a maybe for me, right? This is one of those books where it's like you might like it, you might hate it. I didn't I was like very much in the middle, I didn't care one way or the other. It was like, okay, I read a book. Nice. That's really all I got to say on that one. I don't really know how to even like. There's nothing that I can say. You can read this in a day. That's one of the perks, I guess. One of the positives is it's a very fast read. Next, I read Quicksand and Passing by Nella Larsen, and I'm kind of going to discuss these two alongside one another because they are both very short novellas. I believe each is under 200 pages. So this is one of those things where you will probably like this or enjoy reading both of these simply because Nella Larsen has a huge talent for being able to convey a lot of information, convey a lot about many different characters in a very short amount of time. I read Quicksand first because the copy that I borrowed from the library, it was both of these novellas together, and Quicksand was first, so I just read it first. And I found Quicksand to be more enjoyable. One, because I think there's just a lot more that happens in this book. Quicksand is about a teacher who works at an all black school in the South. And one day, very early on in the book, literally the first couple pages, she's like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I don't like the curriculum. I don't like the way these students are being taught. I don't like that I don't have any control over this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to figure out my life. I'm going to quit this job and figure out my life. And that's exactly what this short story is about. It is about this character just exploring the world, exploring her place in it, exploring what she's meant to do. And it ends in a very shocking way, as does Passing. I think both of the endings felt very abrupt and very like, oh my God, wait, what? That's the feeling that I felt at the end of both of these novellas. Now, Passing is more so about our character Irene exploring a very flawed and interesting friendship with a woman named Claire that she used to go to high school with. Both of these women are biracial, but they both pass as white in certain situations. And Claire is actually married to a white man who doesn't know that she is not white. And Irene is married to a black man who knows who she is, right? So this is oftentimes portrayed to be a homoerotic dynamic. I didn't get that at all in Passing, honestly. I found the dynamic to be more like competitive than anything. It was a very strange dynamic to be sure. But when you factor in the way that this book ended, I don't homoerotic was not even on my radar. I was like, wait, this is what everyone says. I didn't get that. Now that doesn't mean that it's not. It just means that me personally, that's not at all what I got out of that book. Out of the two, I enjoyed Quicksand quite a bit more. Like I said, I think that it kind of is more well rounded, and that Nella Larson was able to articulate a lot of different information and a lot of different characters in a very short amount of time. But Passing was also really good. Like I thought both were really well done. I loved the vernacular in both of these books. The vocabulary in both of these was really great. And I think Nella Larson had a very distinct style of writing that is very evident in both of these novellas. So if you're thinking about reading one or the other, I would say go with Quicksand, but they're both so easy. They only take a couple hours to read each. So you might as well just go ahead and read both. Okay, folks, we made it. We did it. We did it. Last but not least, we have Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. Now, this is again nonfiction. This is kind of Angela Davis's analysis on the intersections of various struggles, such as systemic racism, Palestinian liberation, Black feminism, the need for prison abolition, and her position on prison abolition as well. And this is, again, just a collection of essays that kind of explores all of these things at different points in time. This was published in 2015, but a lot of this remains true to this day, and the need for solidarity between different human rights movements. And I think that this was a very easily digestible analysis on these things. I haven't read anything else by Angela Y. Davis. I think that there are a couple other books that I would like to read by her, but I think for the most part, this was a really great starting point. If you like nonfiction, you will probably like this one. This is kind of like a cross between the way that I felt about Sister Outsider and Anti-Woman by Bell Hooks. While I think Angela Davis does a really good job of expressing certain historical moments and why they were important and stuff like that. This also does feel more like this is Angela's perspective or her specific analysis on these things based on her observations as an activist and as a kind of like a community leader in regard to human rights movements. So I think that her perspective is very important one. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a great way to wrap up Black History Month. And I think that out of all of the books that I have mentioned, the ones that I enjoyed in January and February the most, I think I'm going to have to say Sister Outsider, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, and Chain Gang All Stars. Obviously, for Black History Month, I did try to orient my TBR toward books by Black authors, but this is something that I try to do all year round anyway. Black History Month was just a really strong month in terms of the books that I was reading. Definitely compared to January was such dog shit that like getting into February and reading all these really great books, some not so great, right? Some not so good. But overall, February was a really good reading month for me. Anyway, these were the 20 books that I read in January and February of 2026. And let me know in the comments if you have read any of these, if you have read any books by these authors that were not these books that you might recommend. But yeah, that was my January, February wrap up. And I will see you guys in the next one.